For millions of years, plants had been quietly changing the earth. Their roots shattered stone. Their leaves pulled carbon dioxide from the sky, and their fallen bodies became buried beneath vast, waterlogged swamps. The forests were creating a new atmosphere, and soon this invisible transformation would create animals of impossible size. When forests created giants. Around 360 million years ago, Earth entered one of the strangest chapters in its history. Warm, shallow seas surrounded broad, tropical continents. Near the equator, immense wetlands stretched toward the horizon. There were no flowering plants, there was no grass, and there were no birds singing in the canopy. But the strangest part of this world was not the forest itself, it was the air surrounding it. Every day, these immense forests absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen. When the plants died, many fell into stagnant water. There, decomposition was slow. Dead trunks, branches, and leaves accumulated faster than microbes could break them down. Layer after layer became buried beneath mud and sediment. The forests were removing carbon from the atmosphere and locking it underground. As carbon disappeared from the sky, oxygen began rising to extraordinary levels. Today, oxygen makes up about 21% of Earth's atmosphere. During parts of the Carboniferous period, it may have approached 30% or more. Every breath contained far more oxygen than it does today. For vertebrates with lungs, the difference was important, but for animals that breathe through tiny their bodies, the effect was revolutionary. For the first time, insects could grow far beyond the limits of the modern world.
Insects do not breathe through lungs. Air enters through small openings along their bodies and travels through a network of tubes called trachees.
This system works extremely well for small animals. But the larger an insect becomes, in the oxygen-rich carbonaceous atmosphere, that limitation became far less severe. And above the swamp, one enormous predator was preparing to rule the sky. Meganeura was one of the most spectacular flying hunters of the ancient world. It resembled a dragonfly, but some species had wingspans exceeding 60 centimeters. Its enormous compound eyes detected movement across an exceptionally wide field of view. Its powerful mandibles could seize and crush smaller insects, and its 4 broad wings allowed it to maneuver through the dense Carboniferous with remarkable precision. But while Meganeura ruled the air, something even larger across the wet forest floor crawled Arthropleura, the largest known land-dwelling arthropod. Some individuals may have reached more than 2 meters in length.
Its broad, flattened body was protected by numerous overlapping armored segments, dozens of li across the damp ground, probably not a giant predator.
It may have fed mainly on decaying vegetation, yet the greatest evolutionary struggle was happening neither in the canopy nor on the forest floor. It was happening at the water's edge.
Rivers, lakes, and flooded swamps were crowded with fish. Some were heavily armored, others possessed powerful jaws. Competition beneath the water was intense.
But beyond the shoreline waited an almost of leaving the water, even briefly, could reach food that ordinary fish could not follow. To escape the water, vertebrates would have to rebuild their bodies. Over millions of years, certain aquatic vertebrates developed stronger internal bones inside their fins. Their skulls became more flexible, their necks allowed the head to move independently from the body, and lungs helped them breathe air. Eventually, their descendants began supporting themselves with 4 muscular limbs. The first vertebrates had reached the land. Early tetrapods evolved into many amphibian-like forms. Some remained small and hunted insects beneath the vegetation. Others became large predators with broad skulls, powerful jaws, and heavy bodies. The wet Carboniferous forests provided almost perfect conditions. The ground remained damp, the air was humid, and ponds, rivers, and flooded channels were everywhere. But every amphibian carried one weakness that prevented it truly conquering the land. Amphibian skin lost moisture easily. More importantly, their eggs had no protective shell. They had to be laid in water or in extremely damp environments. No matter how far an adult traveled onto land, each generation was forced to return to the water. If the ponds disappeared, the eggs and young could die. Then evolution produced a structure that changed vertebrate history forever. Inside a small protected egg was the key to an entirely terrestrial life.
The amniotic egg contained a protected internal environment where an embryo could develop. Special membranes controlled moisture, waste, and gas exchange. A protective outer covering reduced the danger of drying out. For the first time, vertebrates could reproduce away from rivers and ponds. The bond that had tied their ancestors to water for hundreds of millions of years was finally broken. These tiny animals looked insignificant, but their descendants would dominate the planet. The earliest amniotes were small, agile animals, living among roots, fallen trunks, and dense vegetation. From their descendants, two great evolutionary birds. The other would produce the distant ancestors of mammals. Beside the giant arthropods and amphibians, these animals seemed almost unimportant. Then the endless swamp forests began to disappear. Continents continued moving toward one another. Mountain ranges rose as land masses collided. Ocean currents shifted. The global climate became cooler and increasingly dry. The vast equatorial wetlands fragmented into isolated pockets. Swamps vanished, forests retreated. This environmental crisis is often described as the Carboniferous Rainforest Collapse. The world that had created the giants was now destroying them. Large amphibians lost many of the wet habitats they required for reproduction. Giant arthropods faced changing forests and declining oxygen levels. Many disappeared. But the small amniotes were better prepared. Their protected eggs allowed them to reproduce far from water. Their skin reduced moisture loss. The giants vanished, but the smallest survivors inherited the earth. The ancient forests had transformed the planet. They removed carbon from the atmosphere. They filled the air with oxygen. But beyond the dying swamps, the continents were still moving together. Soon, nearly every landmass on Earth would become part of one immense supercontinent, Pangea, a world of vast deserts, brutal seasons, and new predators. The forests had created monsters. Long before the dinosaurs, this was Pangea, a land ruled by creatures like the Dimetrodon. Its massive sail regulated its body temperature,